Hello, everyone. Welcome into Above My Pay Grade. My name is Eric. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, you can follow me at Amp Grade on Rumble, Instagram, and Twitter. Now, uh, one of the narratives that I've kind of followed, and we like narratives, we like stories, and I'm aware that our brains often like to fit people into bad guy and good guy categories, and so the nuance of what's going on globally in economies is a lot harder to wrap your head around. So one of the things I constantly say is, and the Fed, hashtag and the Fed. The Fed's bad. The Fed's gonna trying to print more money. But I listened to a podcast with a guy named Tom Luongo, also Danielle DiMartino Booth. If you guys have ever heard of her, I'll link their channels down the description. But both of them have come out and said that it's really what the Fed's actually doing when they're raising rates is trying to hurt European central banks because they realize that European central banks are becoming more globalist. And if you think about it, um, certain things like Europe and the World Economic Forum are pushing for central bank digital currencies and a global currency throughout the world. They're becoming more globalist. How does that in any way help commercial banks in the United States? Because where do the commercial banks get their money, get their power, is from giving out loans of printed money. And can they do that with the central bank digital currency? No, especially if it's controlled in Europe or by the IMF. And so you got to think, well, Jamie Dimon from Chase isn't on board with this. All the other big banks in the United States can't be on board with this because this takes away from their power. And not saying they're good guys necessarily, but takes away from their power. On top of the fact that over and over again, Jerome Powell has reiterated that the Fed is not there to fight climate change. And you've had European central bank leaders say, "Hey, uh, our role as the European Central Bank is to help fight climate change, to finance this indiscriminate spending, what have you, or socialism in many cases." But in the public eye, Jerome Powell has basically given them the Heisman on that. And he just reiterated this recently. In Tom Luongo's case and Danielle DiMartino Booth's case, is Jerome Powell is actually trying to sink Europe. Okay. Yes, raising rates in a way hurts the United States. And yes, fighting inflation is kind of what he's doing. At least that's what the narrative is. But the analogy is, if American central banks and European central banks are fighting underwater, they're both losing oxygen as uh, they fight underwater and as Jerome Powell raises interest rates. But all that matters in that fight is who drowns first. Okay. Because the other one's still going to be alive and therefore get more of market share, if you will. So I've always had this narrative that there's this, your central bank collusion to devalue, but sometimes their desires are misaligned. Doesn't necessarily mean they're good, but sometimes if you have two powerful organizations, if one of them says, you know what, I want you to transfer some of that power to me, um, they're not going to end up wanting to do that. And this goes back to central bank digital currencies. But I want to pull up this article about Jerome Powell reiterating that the Fed's not there to fight climate change. So this is from CNBC. Powell reiterates Fed is not going to become a climate change policymaker. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell on Tuesday said that central banks will not get involved in issues like climate change that are beyond their congressionally established mandate. One of the things that a lot of politicians do is they abdicate responsibility, especially Congress does, to these agencies. So they give them carte blanche to kind of operate within parameters, like the EPA. They said they don't necessarily give them the rules. They just say, okay, we're going to establish the EPA to fight pollution. And EPA, your job is to fight pollution. Okay, so these unelected bureaucrats, these letter organizations, have a lot of leeway to interpret what Congress's mandate is. Now, Jerome Powell is reiterating congressional mandate is um, unemployment and strength of the US dollar. Now, he's getting a lot of pushback from politicians, which I find interesting, which kind of also builds the case that Tom Luongo and Daniel DiMartino Booth are making that Jerome Powell is not a politician. And he is doing this in spite of tons of pushback, raising these rates. And they think he is doing that to fight European central banks because European central banks are globalist and oftentimes very socialist. So, a quote from Jerome Powell: decisions about policies to directly address climate change should be made by elected branches of government. Bravo. And thus reflect the public's will as expressed through elections. So he has said this over and over again. We're not here to finance climate change policy. Without explicit congressional legislation, it would be inappropriate for us to use monetary policy or supervisory tools to promote a greener economy or to achieve other climate-based goals, Powell said. We are not and will not be a climate change policymaker. All right. So do you think this is all smoke and mirrors from Jerome Powell? I don't think, well, like, to me, when I listen to Tom Luongo, I'm like, he makes a very valid case that, and then watching what Jerome Powell has since done, since raising rates, he makes a very valid and convincing case that he is operating as a enemy to European central banks in their desire for globalism. Because by raising interest rates in the United States, who does it hurt more? Europe or the United States? Again, who drowns first? Who's going to have a bigger issue? I just thought that was an interesting point. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you think that Jerome Powell is actually acting altruistically, meaning he's trying to help the United States, putting the United States first. He's anti-globalist, and that's why he keeps reiterating the points I just pointed out. Let me know what you think in the comments below. See you on the next one. Peace.